Recording is on.
Hello, Global Theater. My name is Jerry Fielka. Today is April 11, 2021. Thank you so much to Clinton Ignatoff, the Netizen Supreme Citizen. And it is an honor and a pleasure to be here with Jon Leidecker. Is that the correct way to pronounce your last name, Jon?
That's dead on.
Thank you so much for your time and energy. The first question, Jon, is what's the best thing for a human being?
Oh my God. You know, I don't think about that enough, probably. You know, we try to we spend so much time into put so much time into perceiving the world so that we can you know, accurately be a part of the world. And I think that it's gotten mankind has learned so much about the world that it's almost easier to think about the world than it is to think about being a self. So getting the balance right between actually being a part of the world and being a self is it's tricky, but being a human being probably has something to do with that. You know, getting the balance right between actually being in your own body and balancing everything that you actually, as an intellect, know about the world that you live in. And that's probably the best I can do.
Well, that was really good, because I have had that answer a few times where people say humanity or being a human. Being human is, you know, I mean, you said more than that, perception. Jon, what's your favorite form of how you receive information?
Oh, it's music.
Yeah,
it's music. I mean,
yeah.
It's so close to language, and yet you know, not quite yet taken in by all the sucker punches that language deals you.
No, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no form of music that I don't aspire to at least someday enjoy. You know, like if somebody else sung it, then I aspire to enjoy it.
It's a great attitude. You know, Walter Patter's great line, all art aspires to the condition of music. So, and boy, Fred Frith was hassled by me when I asked him about that once. So anyways, well, it's a long story. I'll tell you about it some other time. But here's the thing: we're going to get into music after we get through some of your background philosophies and stuff, and we'll dive into that, because you said a lot there that I want to pursue more. And so, why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Boy, you're really starting at the so that they don't so that they you know, so that they don't die. You know, you don't want to be surprised by things. Once you realize that death can come from either the sky or from bacteria, there's so much about the world that you need to know and that's on you to be cognizant of, so that you and your children might make it through the night. And you know, but you know, beyond that, once you get past the survival aspect, there's the pleasure aspect. Information is it's nice to understand the world. So
really well put. Do you think this need or want to collect information, gather it, is more innate in humans or more invented?
I think it's kind of a continuum. Like, you know, you drill down, you're asking some awfully cosmic questions, and I'm trying to answer them in the same way that like any like well-meaning bacteria would answer them, you know, like you know, bacteria has the same concerns. So
you really grasp what we're about here. So yeah, that's fine. It's like the cosmic giggle. So do thoughts create emotions?
I don't know yet. I don't know. I don't know yet.
That's all right.
Yeah,
that's
probably the best I can answer on that. Like, I think being in a body with a constant barrage of perceptions coming from, you know, actual physical stimuli. I think that has more to do with things that create emotions than you know, the refined byproduct of the neocortex.
Yeah, and look at John saying, I don't know. I'm not trying to put you on the spot or say you should know. Saying I don't know is fine. In fact, one of my favorite answers is you probably know him, V. Vale of Research. Research Magazine.
Yeah.
Do thoughts create emotion? And he goes, emotions create emotions. I love that answer, just sticks in my head. So finish this sentence, just to fill in the blank. I don't know what I think until what would you say?
No, I got no answer to that one at all because I don't know what I think.
That's good. That is good. No, you know, the funny continuum is McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I've said it. And Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it down. So, and then it goes on and on, but that was fine. Do you more pursue meaning or do you more pursue happiness?
Probably. My happiness comes from meaning, so probably I prioritize the former and hope that the second just shows up.
Very good. Now, I'm sorry these are barraged at first. We'll get into more practical music things too, which you're very articulate about. And
Is this is a template? Like, this is to the letter what you all.
This is a template. 30 years, Alvin, Lucifer, all these guys, all these guys you saw on my list, they all pretty much get them. But, I adjust.
Gotcha. You have, these are your big questions.
Yeah, but it actually has grown over 30 years and I've refined and, there's some really specific music things we'll get into, which, when I saw you speak at the Ann Arbor Film Festival Salon on your amazing performance there, I was like, this guy, is someone I would like to talk with because I really appreciate what you said. And so does the brain more detect consciousness or create consciousness? So is consciousness like just bubbling there and we're detecting it, or are we actually creating it?
Well, that is another one that's above my pay grade. A lot of the way we understand consciousness only comes as the technology and the tools that we create catch up to the sophistication of what we ourselves are capable of. And so the most interesting people involved in artificial intelligence right now all tie consciousness once again to being in a body. Like the people who are trying to write pure code that come up with thoughts without actually also having, incoming data and, perceptual streams of data coming from an actual regulatory nervous system. Like, you don't get consciousness with the reason what the brain exists is to pilot the meat stack, the flesh, and the thoughts then just sort of like begin spiraling out. But you don't get consciousness without the body.
Yeah.
So that sends the AI people down a hole where they're trying to make the robot sophisticated enough and the recipient of enough data streams coming from actually being in a ambulatory structure than the ones that are just basically writing code that run from a CPU buried in a mountain somewhere. But I've already forgotten your question.
No, that was good. I love this. I want to be a CPU buried in a mountain. That was good. So what's faster, John, the speed of light or the speed of thought?
that's probably got like a real answer. You know, like they've got the resolution of neurons firing down to 2 or 3 microseconds. And, you know, there's actual distance being traversed, you know, as the neurons like fire on down, you know, carve out the space in your brain. So I don't want to answer yet because I don't know.
That's fine. And like, again, all these questions are more like what your hunch is or what you perceive, your percept, not so much concept. But it's funny because you said that one probably has a real answer. One time I asked this woman, actually it was with the Ann Arbor Film Festival, I said some question. She goes, "Is that a real question?" And then it really sticks out.
It's a real
Is that a real answer? Is that a real question? Okay, so Audre Lorde said you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rayner responded, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
Well, I do think about Lorde's quote quite a lot. And the qualifier I think of probably aligns with Rayner's comment a little bit more closely. Like, you know, the tools, if you use the tools as intended, no, the tools as intended cannot dismantle anything. But artists don't use tools as intended, you know, like there are inadvertent uses. So it's a matter of getting the balance right between knowing exactly what the tools are, including the things that they can do beyond the ways in which they were designed. And, you know, just reaching that pure artistic state of not even caring anything about it and just using them, I don't know. And once you put these tools out into the world, you'll encounter both of those states. You'll encounter people that know exactly what the tools are and people that just pick them up and use them to smash anything that is holding them back. So, yeah, here's to misused tools.
Beautiful. That was well put. I'm glad you're aware of that quote. It's a strong quote to think about. So you actually.
I don't know what software. I've never seen this streaming software before. I'm happy it's not Zoom, but like we think about subversive uses of tools all the time. Every single time we post a press release from Negativland through Facebook, it's just what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, you must have ESPs because you anticipated this one. Marshall McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting the hidden psychic effects of the things we invent so that we can learn to cope with what we don't like about them. So they're broadcasting these unintended consequences. Now, artists are doing this. They might not be aware of it, but they're broadcasting film or, you know, records or books or paintings. So McLuhan knew that we can look to the artist to uncover the hidden psychic effects, but we still ignore them. So why do we still ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though we can look to the artist to expose them?
Our culture has gotten a lot better at ignoring what art is really trying to tell us by simply calling it entertainment. You know, the whole point of culture and music and film and even, you know, novel philosophy, like it's all become mere entertainment, which lets you, oh, did I lose you?
No, I'm here.
Okay. All right. Your picture. Oh, yeah, gotcha. As long as it's entertainment, then it's a lot easier to dismiss it. increasingly news is sold as entertainment. I will never forget when Glenn Beck left Fox News and started his own network. The slogan was the perfect synthesis of education and entertainment. You know, preaching it almost as an ideal that, you know, entertainment is an unqualified good. And art certainly does entertain, but when it goes more to Ezra Pound's definition of revealing and taking these tools and using them to show, to really reveal everything about the system that we're forced to live within, yes, I think some people understand it, but within the wider definition of what art is, which is entertainment, it's just as easier to turn around and say that it's just a film, it's just a movie, it's just the internet, it's just a piece of music. Even if the piece of music is going all the way in and showing you the truth, it's easy to turn around from it and wake up into the dream and tell yourself that the art was the dream. So,
wow, well put. Yeah, that's why Joyce dropped the apostrophe in Finnegan's Wake. He was saying, "Wake the fuck up and realize what electricity's doing to you." All you Finnegans, wake. So, John, are you more afraid of old ideas or more afraid of new ideas?
You do have to be careful about the new ideas, but I like to think that I'm taking these ideas on a case-by-case basis. But maybe I'm just flattering myself.
Yeah, flatter on, dude. What this is all about is just lay your cards on the table, however you feel. We're not holding you to this. You know, this is you. Like my mom said when I wanted to interview her, she goes, "You know, tomorrow I might answer all these questions differently." I goes, "That's all right." You know, can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Oh, that's a good one. Everything before 6 is fuzzy, but and some of my earliest memories I can't trust because I'm in them. Like I'm literally not seeing things from the only possible perspective, which was the eyes that I had, but like I'm actually like, you know, like I'm looking at myself pushing a big wheel through the snow or something. So like those couldn't be, those were obviously already confabulated. But yeah, I don't know. No, they're all still kind of private, you know. The 70s were fucked up.
That's right. Do you think memory is more a curse or more a blessing?
You're a tripper, dude.
That is the best compliment. Can I use that in my press kit, please?
Yeah. I'm coming up short on that one.
No, don't worry. This is the thing. You have to feel free to say, pass, I don't know. And it's not like I'm holding you to having to answer. I know we'll get into the music. Just
well, it was like the cyberneticist said, like when they're asking whether the brain is an analog or a digital machine, and you know, some of them would refuse to answer because they're like, "Oh man, I refuse to answer such a digital question." That's you know, I don't know what to make of memory.
Yeah. Well, the thing is the other thing in doing this over 30 years is that my goal is to refine the questions, to invent new questions, to tackle the form and the content, you know. And it's so the full form of asking questions. You know, Craig Baldwin, I've interviewed him 8 times. He goes, "That's the stupidest question," and then even answer it. And it's, you know, it's the same thing Marty Scorsese did with that Elia Kazan. He asked him a question and Elia goes, "That's a stupid question," and then he answered it.
Yeah.
I don't mind. At least you're being cooperative and you're not that, you know that we'll get to. Okay, tell me in your immediate family, a role model or someone who made an impact on you, and what was that impact? Just briefly, and then it's going to be outside your immediate family. So just someone in your family who had an impact on you, some sort of influence, and briefly, what was the influence?
Oh, it's probably my dad, and he was very good with his selection of bedtime stories when I was 5, 6, 7. I think like when I forget when Martin Gardner's Goodell Escher Bach came out, like whether I was 7 or 8, but like, yeah, that the dialogues in there about the definition of the prefix meta and probability theory and all of that stuff definitely made it into the way I thought about language. Maybe it's good to have that stuff in there before you hit puberty. So yeah, my dad.
That was good. And then outside your immediate family, anyone who had an impact on you, role model, and what was the impact?
I definitely remember meeting Don Joyce of Negativland, like when I was 16 or 17, and I knew his radio show quite well by then. So he was kind of a Zen master.
Yeah.
And there were very few things that he said, even casually, that weren't instructive or that I didn't take something from. So I definitely soaked all that in.
Yeah. You were one of those fortunate people who were raised or helped exposed to an art form through such an amazing radio show as Over the Edge. What, monumental. And I got to tell you this funny joke is the guy's interviewing Captain Beefheart, and he goes, "What do you think of Joyce?" And Captain Beefheart went, "Joyce who?" So it's almost like you can apply it to Don Joyce. So what do you think of Joyce? Joyce who? Don Joyce.
Yeah, that would have been my answer to the question from an early age.
It's like, and that's how Beefheart was. He was sort of all encompassing. So did your parents raise you a particular religion?
There was a lot of Catholicism in there until their divorce, at which point, there were philosophical conflicts, came up with their entire unavoidable course of action that made Catholicism a non-starter. But, it's like any religion, it's still in there. Still definitely in there.
Wow. See, that's what my follow-up is usually, are you still practicing? And my follow-up question to you would be, do you pray?
Not particularly within the, not within the church.
Yeah. That's fine. If God exists, what do you want God to tell you after you die?
Hopefully I'll figure that out before too long.
Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Yeah, evil is a relationship. Evil depends upon a construction of the other, so probably more towards the latter, Yeah. The people who end up getting called by evil by history are, it's always self-defense as far as they're concerned. So it's hard to ever call it. You just have to look at the overall pattern.
Boy, you got a pattern recognition. So this question, Don, I'm going to set up with a few modern thinkers' thoughts, but the question is basically, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Coppola stole from the mob and the samurais, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you react, or what do you feel about Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Yeah, that's not a bad one. You just have to know enough about the relationship to know whether or not it's you know, whether the struggle is can be overcome, you know, like it's not even enemies, it's frenemies. Like what happens when you follow the Alan Watts dogma a little bit too closely is that you you end up in a consistent struggle that is taking away more than it's putting back in. So you can have all the good faith in the world and yet still end up, you know, working for a friendship that is just destroying, just ruining the whole community you're a part of because you guys shouldn't be hanging out. Yeah. But yeah, I haven't been very good at that in the past, actually. So I should probably just call the answer there.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because my notes, John, have the word frenemies after the Coppola quote. And I sometimes throw the word in, well, that's frenemies. You keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And, you know, so that was funny. You must have some sort of ESP because you read my notes without seeing it. So thank you. James Joyce was the first projectionist over 100 years ago in Dublin. He had a cinema called Volta. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, Faulkner said, sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Life changes and life is not always from your perspective, and art is very good at not only documenting moments which pass, but it's good at empathy. It's good at helping you understand, I don't know, take your pick. Like Harold Bloom might be, you know, like that is, Ulysses is the most over-specific description of one person's experience. But by drilling that deep down into it, like he ends up saying something about all art, you know. Yeah, I mean, art is, you don't ever want to make the mistake of, I think what the mistake that a lot of art or a lot of fans of art make is that, you know, the understandings that you get from it are so resonant that sometimes you feel as if you would prefer to live there. When in fact, you know, the best way to think about these artifacts are as arrows that point you back in the direction of the real world experiences that you should be seeking out yourself. So you know, don't spend too much time in the museum. Just like, you know, get the map in, and then hit the road.
That's perfect. You know, I grew up looking at art books of Francis Bacon, you know, a pretty good painter, and then I had postcards of him in my bedroom, and then I saw one of his shows at the Tate, and the paintings were huge, and I went up to him and I screamed and yelled and ran out of the art museum like they were too overwhelming. So it was like, whoa, because
they're big.
I knew him, yeah, I knew him as these teeny things. That was really poetic what you said, and I loved your word empathy, because a couple of years ago, this big shot video maker, can't think of his name, but his video game is just a mountain. He's
Kevin O'Reilly. Kevin O'Reilly.
Yeah, you know what he said? He said, "Fuck storytelling, it's all empathy."
Well, there's a bad faith thing that often gets used, like all the people who are designing virtual reality technology, like they always use the word empathy, like how these are incredibly beneficial technologies because they'll help us understand what it's like to be in each other's nervous systems. But where the bad faith comes in is that at the same time, the mechanisms they're designing to enable all of this empathy are these things that totally trick the nervous system, that overwhelm the nervous system, that just sort of replace the nervous system's ability to, you know, unentangle real from depiction. Like these things, sure, yes, if you, the intellect within you that's left over can understand that it's just, you're being only told a story to, but the technology itself exists to trick you and to replace. Like, you know, they are totally, you know, the people who are designing VRs as empathy machines or storytelling machines, sure, yes, but most people are actually just designing machines that will replace reality, like absolutely take it over. They're designing machines that people will prefer to live within. And we were talking about evil, like that's not good. No, that is when people just basically when you design something that people would prefer to live their lives within, then, well, yeah, that's just a pain spiral. You're not gonna be able to have a very happy life if you've totally turned over your perceptual inputs to those people's machines.
Yeah, Jon, isn't the designers of spoken word and printed word designing a trick, something that tricks this nervous system? Like, how is that different?
It's not different. It's not different.
Okay.
Books do the same, and I love reading books, and I've spent so much of my life reading books.
Yeah.
You know, they are models. Like, you know, if you go back to that Negative Land piece, you know, Don Joyce's crucial cut up, you know, like the one that in some ways is at the centerpiece of his whole career, was when he took that, made a tape piece out of the woman explaining Russell's paradox, where a sentence that is capable of declaring itself false leads you into a logical loop that you can never break your way out of. And the point that you're supposed to get out of that is that language cannot refer to itself. Like the error in logical typing, like, you know, when a language begins referring to the truth or falsity of its own matter, then you get the infinite instant recursive loop. And our brains frequently live in language to such an extent that we think that is, you know, something can only be true or false if you can state it. And then you make that critical error of having all of your logic built out of language. Well, anyway, yeah, books, you know, they're useful, but you need to keep them in perspective.
Yeah. Really well put. Thank you. So, Jon, what first attracted you? Just sort of a brief run through your through line. You're listening to Kraftwerk and Human League before you're hearing Over the Edge, or while you're hearing? And then at what point did you go, I can do this? Like, did you start hearing electronic music and then you found the groups that you could resonate with, and then you found Over the Edge? Or like, just the through line, and where did you get to the point where you went, hey, I can do that?
I think I always liked electronic music. I think I have a lot of early memories of hearing, like I grew up in Washington, D.C., and I remember hearing Parliament, and I remember hearing Bernie Worrell's keyboards.
Wow, that is Godhead. I never knew that.
Yeah, well, just like, what are you going to do? So Kraftwerk made sense, and DJ Scratch mix, like, you know, DJ Scratch mixes made sense. Jean-Michel Jarre made sense. Like, you know, anything electronic, and frequently was like European space music that knew what it was doing with electronics in the 70s, but just as much it was urban R&B. Like they were the people that, like, you know, totally knew what Kraftwerk was saying and took it further into pop music. So I grew up loving hip hop as much as Kraftwerk. And then I tuned into Over the Edge like one night randomly around 1985, and just pretty much got it. Like, the tension before while listening to these records is, how do you play this music live? Because I had no idea how you would play Kraftwerk live, how you would play, you know, like Juan Atkins, Cybertron Clear, like how does that get played live? That has to be a studio. And then I tuned into the Negative Land show and I heard people improvising live with pre-recordings, and yeah, the light bulb went off, and those were my people.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to interview Patrick Gleason a few years ago.
Excellent. Oh, you know, my God, that guy.
With all these same questions. And he's basically this white hippie dude who is actually a jazz pianist sitting on stage with Herbie Hancock's all black funk group, you know, turning these knobs, teaching Herbie about the synthesizer. Then he actually did the producing on Devo's first record, but he didn't get credit. He barely got credit as engineer. But anyways,
that was before the Connie Plank sessions, or like when like I don't think I knew that they hung out.
Yeah, they anyways, I think you can listen to it on archive.org, my interview with Patrick Gleason.
I'll check that out.
But it was sort of like
the bootlegs of Gleason playing like with Mondwishy, like right after Sextant. Those are they went pretty far out. Those are fantastic tapes.
But anyways, you know, Devo had to like pay him some money to be quiet because they had to say Eno produced or whatever. I don't even know the details. It doesn't matter. It's all good. But a screenwriting teacher told me that in Godhead is Bernie Worrell. That was beautiful. That I love that you mentioned that, because to me it is so important what P-Funk and George Clinton has done to the world. In fact, I asked George all these same questions also. So a screenwriting teacher told me that a great film or great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Stanley Kubrick says the opposite. Great film, great art, and great music is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process?
I'm pretty into concepts, but you know, it's not like I have raw feelings or emotions that I'm trying to get out. It's I just like I've always liked meta music that just sort of uses technology but doesn't obscure the ways in which the technology is being used. Instead of treating it like a magic or a conjuring trick, or, oh my God, I've never heard anything like this before. Maybe it's I've never heard anything like this before, but it makes sense, and I can tell why it's making sense. So my intent is to you know, have that curtain thrown back so that people can really understand what the tools are that are being used to create this thing that hasn't existed before, you know?
Yeah.
Something like that. Like the intent is important, but the intent usually has to do more with the concept or with the, you know, the culture, the society we live in, rather than like me having had a bad day and being sad about a relationship or something.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's sort of discussed in the Finnegan's Wake world also. James Joyce was, how do you make something out of nothing? But here's the question that Fred Frith says, quit hassling me with Duchamp. Duchamp, it was a great reaction because it was a teeny little salon, and it was just a great response. I loved it. Duchamp, yeah, Duchamp said there's no, and I love Fred Frith. I'm not looking.
Oh yeah,
yeah. We know we're mutual. Okay. So Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. What role does the audience play in your creative process while you're creating? Are you thinking of the audience?
I think I spent a lot of time when I was young trying not to think of the audience. And like one of the side effects of me playing live a lot, but always playing on the radio with Negativland was that you could ignore the audience or have them like stay theoretical. Like, you know, I wouldn't actually be in the physical space with them. So they could stay totally hypothetical. But it doesn't take, and especially when you're a teenager and you're like, you know, ravenously consuming as many records as possible, but like, you know, listening to them by yourself, it sort of skews your, you know, it introduces a delay, to say the least, in the way in which you perceive music as a social circuit, you know, like a social environment. But then you go through life and you meet all the other people who listen to those records, and you start playing live in the same room with people, and you realize that you cannot help but have them in mind. And then later on, even when you're making records and composing records and finishing them by yourself, it just creeps in. You're thinking about, you're not necessarily like compromising yourself, but you're taking your message into account. You're taking the fact that like you actually are delivering something that might be overheard or presented to somebody else. You're doing it. And then at that point, like you actually even start like, you know, what are you trying to say? How many people do you want to hear it? Who are the people you want to hear it? Is it the widest possible audience, or is it, you know, a room with 30 people, or is it an opera, or is it, you know, would you be comfortable if millions of people heard this, or not comfortable? These questions creep in, and they're not compromises. They're just part of making something without just talking to yourself. So
yeah, very interesting. Yeah, because you know, Frank Zappa say, you know, I make this music for myself and not other people, and if they like it, that's great. But he knew, he lived in a consumer culture. He knew if he hit these notes and said these words that he could make more money, so he could go do an electronic album with Boulez. He knew that there is this sensibility, and I felt he was romanticizing that process. But you know, the great line from Paul Schrader says, the role of the artist is to attempt to sell out but fail. So, you know, you're supposed to say, oh my God, I make music for myself and not other people. And if they like it, wow, that's a bonus, you know. But it's a shared experience. And just one observation, and being subsumed in Zoom for 1 year, having done live salons for 30 years, people in a room talking. This is what I've done for 30 years. Zoom is better than having people live in a room. And this is just my observation, because everybody's looking at each other and everybody's attentive. When I have 8, 10, or 30 people in a room, I'm not looking at each one of their faces and knowing they're being attentive. And there's better attention. So, you know, I'm just saying, I was forced to change. I didn't go, I want to do this, you know. So I appreciate
what I noticed teaching kids. I wasn't sure whether they were just all digital natives who've grown up like, you know, with screens, but yeah, there's something about having the cascading windows. Like it's face to face. You notice much more immediately with peripheral vision everybody's more locked into each other. It's totally true.
Yeah. And it's like the great George Carlin line, whatever happened to letting kids stare out the window? And I say, you know, cute quotes are not for the quote itself, it's how you're going to reinvent it. And I say, whatever happened to letting kids stare at their cell phone when nothing's on it? They're still going to stare at it because it's like their habitual window that they're looking and getting into a groove of just daydreaming. So now it's going to be whatever happened to letting kids stare at their Zoom screen when there's no teacher there. You just do a Zoom with yourself.
One of the categories of consumers that Facebook lets you advertise to are people who pretend to text with other humans when they're in awkward physical situations.
Yeah.
So they know that about you, and you are a demographic.
Yeah. This is like showing films, experimental films for 30 years also. When cell phones came in, I would yell, I'd go, fucking do your cell phone out in the lobby. And people would get pissed at me. They go, my dad's dying and I have to monitor his health. And I'd be like, okay. And then I just gave up because I realized they have to have their cell phone in their hand in order to see the film. That is just, that's who they are. And 1 year in Ann Arbor, you'd think, oh, these are real film people. The kid was doing his cell phone in his pocket, so no one would see that he was doing it. I mean, now blatantly, they just fucking flash their cell phone in front of your face in the movie theater, and no one cares because they're all of the same ilk. So, you know, and you know, you don't even say anymore, please put your cell phone on this mode during the movie, you know.
No, you'd be laughed out of the theater.
Sorry to rant, but if clothing is an extension of our skin and knife and fork extends our teeth and the shutter in a camera extends our eyelid, you know, this idea that everything we invent extends some humanness. What does electronics extend for you, Jon? What humanness is extended in your tool of electronics?
It's more just a matter of being a human in an environment in which the electronics exist. And so the human experience now has to account for all these electronics. And so I prefer music that helps me understand the influence that they have in exactly everything that they do. You know, like I would just want I would want the media to be being straight with me about what these electronics are. So it's not, if they help me be more human, it's that I am a human that coexists with them, you know, not necessarily that they reveal or, no, but like a lot of my favorite electronic music, you know, there's a long history of orchestral music or music that emulates bird song or emulates insect call or animal calls. Like, you know, one of the oldest things you do is you design an instrument that helps you, you know, model animal cries. And so one of my favorite genres of electronic music from the beginning, there's nothing quite like an oscillator to emulate birdsong. And, you know, the very earliest experiments by Louis and Bibi Baron, like their first piece, Heavenly Menagerie in 1948, like we still haven't heard it, but it's been digitized from the garage. And I hope we'll hear it someday because yeah, electronics are good. Electronics are actually good at helping us model and therefore understand very basic aspects of animal speech. So that includes humanity too.
Jon, I want to thank you because your lecture on YouTube really taught me about barons, and it was so fascinating to learn. They're like the Eames, Charles and Ray Eames of the electronic, the amazing couple. That was really beautiful how you brought them. So Aaron Coppola, oh, go ahead.
No, just underrated, you know, like they're world famous because of Forbidden Planet. but almost because of their success in Hollywood, they were denied the reputation that they deserve. You know, I can't think of an earlier electronic music studio in the United States, let alone one that, you know, just the whole period where they were working with Cage and Tudor, and their influence and impact on Tudor, who is now largely regarded as the godfather of like live electronic music practice. You know, Tudor got that at the Barons, and that has not, there hasn't been enough. Nobody even knows that. So
yeah. No,
anyway.
but I know it now because I watched your lecture, which I, you know, think people should pursue.
I think it'll come. It's in the history books. Like, it's just a matter of time. So, but anyway.
So Aaron Copland wrote in What to Listen For in Music in 1939. The 4 elements of music are rhythm, melody, harmony, and tone color. Now we know rhythm, melody, and harmony, but especially in regards to electronic music, in layperson's term, how would you define or explain what is tone color?
Well, it's the overtones. For years, melody was considered to be the most important thing about composition because that was all that written notation allowed you to write down, like the sequence of notes, the intervals, and, you know, to a certain paltry degree, the dynamics. And of course, you could specify your instruments, but the actual shape and coloration and tone color, you know, of the instruments was left to the actual performers. You know, I think most composers secretly understood that all of the actual emotion in music, you know, kind of comes from that level of performance. It's the tone color, it's the overtones, it's the 3 to 5K range. That's what stimulates the inner ear and literally, you know, provokes subjective emotional response in the listener. And so in the early 20th century, composers began trying to elaborate shape music to like get at that level of compositional control. But you know, there was pushback. There were composers who said, oh, all of that is just ornamental. Like, you know, the actual core of a composition is what you can write down. It's just the melody. It's just the tones. It's just the notes. But, you know, the more we find out about what actually moves people in music, the melody is a mnemonic device. The actual stuff that moves you is in the that's in the mids and uppers. So, you know, there's Marianne Amichet is a fantastic composer who dedicated her whole life to organizing otoacoustic emissions and the actual sympathetic vibrations of your inner eardrum. You know, she understood that, like, we've got it totally switched. The melody is the least important part. The upper range is what actually provokes, you know, the emotion, the subjective feeling that only you are hearing something. That's, yeah, she was a genius. But electronic music is also better at getting and nailing and documenting and, you know, engineering that mid to upper ear response.
Yeah. Well, it's leading into some more discussion I want to bring up, and I appreciate that. You're teaching me a lot, and I'm thankful. So a friend of mine says with music, there's the 3 T's: theory, technique, and taste. So Dave Liebman, the great saxophonist, played with Miles. He's similar. Theory is like head, technique is like hand, taste is like heart. So we know you can study and learn technique and learn theory. How does one acquire taste?
Community helps.
Yeah.
Decades help. I don't know. I always know when I'm onto something. I know sometimes when I am listening to a record that's going to be really important to me, precisely because it makes me so uncomfortable, because it's challenging me, or like, you know, making me feel really, so many of my favorite records I really did not like at first, or, and yet over years I have recognized that precise kind of revulsion or discomfort as being sort of the dead giveaway. It's like, no, you actually already love this. This is already, it's too late. You already totally have given into this. This is like this feeling that you have where you want to run. This is already one of your favorite records. Like this thing that's like making you want to like burn the record. Like, no, that's you're about. This is the first of 10 copies you're going to buy over the years, every single time it comes out in the new format, you know. So that's taste, and it takes a while. It just takes a while to even realize that you have it.
John, well put, because I asked Nels Klein, the great avant-garde guitarist who sold his heart to Wilco. You know, he's doing a good job playing.
Oh, he does a great job.
Yeah. You know, he's a great guitarist. I said, what do you think of Sonny Chirac? He goes, I want to love him a lot more than I do. I says, that is a great answer. But really, you resonated with George Clinton completely. I says, I asked him, what kind of music do you like? He goes, I like the kind of music that fucking fucks me up and pisses me off. And like, why do I hate this? You know? Yeah. So that's beautiful. It's challenging. So what's more fundamental, music or language?
Probably music, but not like you'd know or remember.
That's good. McLuhan said that song is slowed down speech. The reason cultures have different musical tastes is ultimately connected to language difference. Any comment?
Oh, he does that great thing where he just says, like, the second you slow speech down. Yeah, it's the second you slow the word, you have music. And it's oh, absolutely. And Americans are so impoverished. I am so impoverished. I'm pretty monolingual. But you know, whenever I love music that is spoken in a different language, I always end up looking up for a translation after that honeymoon period where I let myself listen to it as pure sound and let it mean nothing. You always end up being driven to reverse engineer what the full picture is, what they're saying.
Yeah.
Usually the lyrics are to the key to it, you know, like you almost are never wrong. If you love something, you know, you don't, you know, translate it and you realize like, oh, they're singing Mein Kampf, or like, you know, it's usually if you love the music, you're dealing with a vantage point that you are also responding to, but it's, you liked the music because it was different. So, yeah, language obviously keys into that.
Very well put, because when I heard the tuba throat singers, I felt it was transcendental and put me in like the Bulgarian women's choir. It just put me in this whole other universe.
Yeah, and then you know what they're singing about. They're singing about their fucking horses.
Right. Then I realized there's three things they're singing about: horses, boots, and snow.
Yeah. And women, but like, you know, they're riding their horse to get to the woman. Oh man, no, one of the most profound, I have a friend in common who introduced me to the Conjure two guys, and we managed to do a recording session at my a recording studio when I worked at Digidesign in Daly City. And we just got good and stoned and recorded them at 192 kilohertz. The whole point of the exercise was I wanted to be able to like record them at an ultra high sampling rate so that we could slow down and listen to throat singing at quarter speed. And oh yeah, it was religious. Like, but the thing that I really remember is that, like, even on playback, like they understand what recordings are. You sing along to the recordings. Whenever we played something back, they almost couldn't help it. They started singing again along with themselves.
Oh, that is it.
Yeah, that was religious. That was religious.
That's
and also
like,
walking back to their cars, like in the parking lot, which was this highly reverberant structure, and listening to them do throat singing into the parking garage echo, like as they were walking back to their van. Like that was, yeah, they knew what they were doing.
That is beautiful. And so in the Ann Arbor Salon, you mentioned Robert Ashley, which was so appropriate because, you know,
Ann Arbor.
He was part of that once group in the birth of the Ann Arbor Film Festival 59 years ago. Yeah. But could you review and put it in layperson's terms? You said, my notes are scribbled. Language melts back into, I think, music. Rational brain gives us each word antithetically. What were you basically saying? Sorry. What were you basically saying that does? What does Robert Ashley do that you like? You said specifically with words, you know, in his music.
He's just clearly such a really good listener. And understands, you know, when I listen to Robert Ashley's records, he has this true gift for reading. So like he'll write a libretto for one of his operas and then manages to deliver it, to render it, flipping the prosody and emphasis you'd normally give to any word. You know, like when people say a sentence in the English language, normally certain things get stressed, and he just manages to still seem as if he's trying to mean something, and yet he emphasizes literally every other word you'd expect him to emphasize while saying something. And it has this unbelievable effect of not only the first several times you listen to any of his operas, you can't follow the plot because, like, you can't decode the normal flow of his speech, but instantly it all just melts back into pure music. And he's also at the same time like doing it with these speech patterns that are just pure Midwest, pure Americana, pure just connected to the last 100 years of the way people in rural communities talked to each other. And he just gets it, you know? So you just feel as if you're listening to this pure information. And yeah, like, you know, language basically turns back into very pure music when you're listening to him. And then once you actually do understand what he's actually saying and unpack what his actual narratives are in his operas, they are that much more meaningful and brilliant once you actually begin understanding it. Once you hear the story, oh, this is a traveling salesman, like, you know, alone in his hotel room at 10 p.m., like doing Buddhist exercises while drinking whiskey before going out on the job the next day. And it's just so, you know, like then Ashley's really got you. Yeah. But yeah, Ann Arbor, like what a crazy place. Once group, and I'm also especially fascinated with Milton Cohen's Space Theater, which was really some of the very first earliest surround sound exercises in the entire country. It even predated Henry Jacobs' Vortex experiments in San Francisco. So yeah, Ann Arbor, what are you going to do?
Yeah, Elvin's Lucifer. There's a whole bunch of them. David Rosenboom and all these people. So
you Sonic Arcade. It's all yeah. You know, a lot going on. I hate to do this because I know we're recording. Let me run into the next room and grab my power supply because I forgot to bring it in. So 30 seconds.
No worries at all. And for the audience, just to be aware, we're interviewing Jon Leidecker of Negative Land. He's been in Negative Land for over 10 years. That band is about 40 years old. We really recommend you go to his websites that are listed, and you will get more information about his actual solo work as Wobbly, and his group that he works with is Negative Land. And we are just having a ball here. And Jon, it's really a pleasure, because the next the comment that you just made, and you really put Robert Ashley into layperson's terms for me, and I understood him so much better, is he was doing what the symbolists, the poets that got their chops from Edgar Allan Poe, in my opinion, of what you just said, because Poe invented the detective novel, which is reasoning backwards, which is effects precede causes. So he said, only give the people a little and let them go, I can fill in the blank. Then you got them. And this is then he spawned the symbolist poetry movement in France, who spawned Bob Dylan, Jim Morrison, Patti Smith, and Kurt Cobain, and all those poets who wrote rock poets. But Mallarmé, the great symbolist poet, said, paint the thing itself. Excuse me, don't paint the thing itself, paint the effect it produces. So it seems as to me that Ashley was doing that. He wasn't making the thing itself, he was making the effect it produces. And then afterwards, like you said, then you can study and fill in the blanks. But you can be overwhelmed by the gap is where the action is, which McLuhan would say, you know, that in-betweenness you talked about, you know, turning language turns into pure music. So that was really well put, how you explain that. Now, how about this one, sucker? Because you also brought up Pauline Alaveras, who, again, you must have ESP, because I talked to Pauline in a parking lot, a parking structure in Santa Monica. You know, she's in this parking structure playing her accordion. You know, it was just so surreal. And in a LA Free Press issue in the summer of '69, Frank Zappa mentioned Pauline Alaveras' work with sound above the audible and below the audible, creating a mass. Here's the line that Frank said, and then I'd love for you to suss out your feelings on this. Frank said, not that it created a mass, it created something audible. It produced a some indifference tone, which has happened to be located within the audible frequency range. By combining something so high you couldn't hear it and something low you couldn't hear it, it yields something in the middle that you could hear. Whether or not you like what you hear is in the middle is another question. The concept is brilliant. So, you know, suss out, what is Frank explaining Pauline there in terms that you can relate to, and how do you yourself explain this phenomenon that working with sound above the audible and below creates a mass?
Well, what he's referring to is a phenomenon called heterodyning, where if you tune two audio oscillators well above the audible frequency range, like, you know, say 30K, and you tune one to 30K, and you turn another one to 30,001, say, or 30,005, then those two oscillators mixed into the same channel will, you won't hear any of that. That's like, you know, twice above the average human's frequency range. But those two together will begin to beat and vibrate against each other at 5 hertz. Or, you know, and so she would take two hyper frequency ranges and begin playing with them until they begin vibrating against each other in the audible range. And often those patterns wouldn't just be like 30 hertz. They'd be far more complex than that because of the eccentricities of the audio equipment that wasn't really built to carry 30 hertz. So like you'd be basically pummeling the system and exaggerating all of its flaws by forcing it to heterodyne way above the audible human range. So in other words, you're getting an audio signal that is far more complex and far more interesting and unstable than if you just took an audio oscillator and turned it to 30 hertz or like 100 hertz.
Yeah.
So she'd like basically just set them high up against each other, sometimes 3 or 4 of them, and then just explore the beating patterns by making slight differences. Yeah, they expose the hypersonic range. You learn something about the hypersonic range by listening to the artifacts that basically show up in the audible range. This is great. And it sounds crazy. Like she generated hours of stuff. There was a fantastic, that's one of 4 is that came out on Columbia Records in the 60s, and Bye Bye Butterfly was made using heterodyning. So most of her classic pieces that did come out in the 60s or 70s were examples of that. But there was a fantastic 12 CD box set called Reverberations, which is just loaded with that era of pieces. And it's all, she was oh my God. Yeah. I can't speak highly enough about her. And I don't get sick of listening to her music.
Yeah. And the beauty also of her just combining the words deep listening, you know.
Well, what do microphones do? You know, like there's one way of looking at it, which is that they capture and therefore let you control. But her technique from the very beginning was, you know, what she realized is that when you play back a recording, it is so divorced from your experience of what you, even if you were there in the room when the microphone was making that recording, she just realized very quickly that the recording captures more than your nervous system perceived at the time. And so you're kidding yourself if you're thinking that this is a tool that captures and therefore lets you control. Like, you know, your technique from the very beginning with electronic music has to be to listen, not to compose first or go in thinking that you have something that you finished that you need to realize. No, the equipment is just the first stage of listening, and then you step out of that and move forward with listening.
That's amazing. What you just said reminds me of Jean Rouch, the French documentarian and theorist, said, if I put a camera between me and you, it's more true than if there's no camera.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So Thelonious Monk said there are no wrong notes. Agree or disagree?
Oh, well, it's there are no wrong notes. Absolutely agree. Yeah. There's just flow.
Yeah. And Ruth Draper, sort of the godmother of performance art, said the key is to bring the audience up onto the stage and into the scene with you. It is they who must give you even more than you give them in a way of imagination and creative power. Now, you could just address this in terms of you're in a studio doing a radio show, but you've toured with Negative Land. How do you bring the audience up onto the stage with you? Or just suss that out, what she's saying, you know, that the key is to bring them onto the stage with you, you know, and it sounds like magical, but how do you do that, you know?
Well, it's strange because like I still with Negative Land, like the ideal performing situation with them is still the radio station. And even when Don and I and Peter and Mark were all physically there in the station, we'd all be wearing headphones, and sometimes we wouldn't even be in the same room. So the only thing you really get is the stereo. You get the sound, and your imagination does the rest. So in many ways, as alienated or as mediated as that is, if the content itself is accommodating that distance, then, you know, where's the stage? Like, yeah, where's the stage to begin with? That's the answer.
It's great because my series is all about inventing new questions. So when you answer a question with the question, you win. So John, Michael Apted made a rock video documentary about 35 years ago. He recently passed, and he's a great filmmaker. And I said, this is right when MTV was breaking 35, 40 years ago. And he said, I said, why do rock video editors feel so obliged to edit fast? Now, indeed, Abel Gance invented rapid montage in about the 27, but it really flourished in this sort of period of MTV. Marty Scorsese says, I cut my films faster because of MTV.
Yeah.
So I got the answer from Michael Apted. He said, well, because we've learned to take in information faster. Now, my question is asked with a bias. Can we actually learn to take in information faster, or are we just brainwashed to believe we can?
I think we can take in information faster, but all of this is like, it's accretion. Are we really taking in information faster? Because all of the edits are conveying the same message, you know, like the super fast editing style, it's never really non sequitur. It's actually pretty easy to predict, you know, that constant information or that constant variety is usually telling you the same thing that you've already seen in a dozen other, 100 other, 1,000 other videos. Like, the only reason why it works is because the stories being told are identical to all the other rapid fire stories. So sure, we're able to take in more information, but it's not novel information. It's actually a style. Yeah, I don't know.
That's good. Is it literally possible to multitask?
Yeah, I think it's possible.
Yeah. So, you know, I love your title, Wobbly, and I did a little research and learned that one of my heroes, Utah Phillips, was a wobbly. And so was Noam Chomsky. So Utah said, anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. So what a great line. So what is your take on that line? No, actually, I'm sorry. I got that wrong. Utah Phillips says anarchy is making rules for yourself and not other people. The question is, who's entitled to make the rules?
Who's entitled?
You're right. Isn't that a horrible? I need a better verb there, maybe.
Yeah. Well, we're that's a pretty that goes to the heart of anarchism, right? Yeah, I don't have the exact answer myself.
Well, it's interesting, John, because this guy in San Francisco runs amazing press. It's PM Press. I think it's PM Press. He sells all the heavy underground political books, or even not underground. And he said, nah, that Utah Phillips quote is not really what anarchy is. It sounds cute, but he says that's not really. But anyways, I had to throw that in because I just love to celebrate Utah Phillips and the fact that he came out of wobbly. So what do you think? Yeah, what do you think the motive of the cave artist was? Not what Herzog says or the anthropologist, just your gut feeling.
Oh man. I mean, it's a model of reality, right? You are staring at everything that they tried to paint everything that exists, everything important, everything that was important to them.
Yeah.
And when you actually look at the, you know, you need to see them in 3D, like the way that they actually painted onto the curve of the surface of the wall. Like, you know, if there was a little like rock jutting out, that's where they'd put the cow or the wolf, and they'd paint the shape of the cow like onto the three-dimensional, you know, forms of rock that was already there. They are just accentuating and working with the medium as it already existed. You know, it's a model of reality that helps other people that are growing up understand everything that's actually important about the reality that they're growing into.
Is perception reality?
Nowhere near stoned enough. It's certainly part of reality, man.
Yeah. So, Jon, tell me one major element of your creations that's changed, and one major element that stayed the same in the years you've been creating.
I try not to. Oh, but it always sounds like me. I don't know. I'm just still ripping off my favorite people, and you know, trying to make more of it. I'm fine with repeating myself, actually, because I don't like listening to recordings wear out. You know, like it's a trick of the mind to think that you can never listen to one twice. Like it's better to have new pieces of music all the time. So there's undoubtedly a through line in there somewhere. I still listen to lots of Dieter Mobius. I'm still ripping him off like crazy.
Yeah, well, you know the great T.S. Eliot line, the mature poet steals, the immature poet imitates.
Yeah, yeah, you're just supposed to connect right up to the traditions you find important enough to, you know, keep going. They're traditions for a reason. You choose them.
Yeah. So Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says that if you can literally identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness that you've turned into a strength.
I hate everything I've ever done, and I have no strengths. I don't know. I don't know. I gotta pass on that one.
That's good. Well, can you do like another 10 or 15, or you're burnt?
Yeah. We could. Yeah.
Okay, cool. How do you find peace of mind?
No, I'm not that good at that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hiking's good though.
If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
All of the people on all those records you are listening to are real, and they are your community, whether or not you meet them in person. But if you're not careful, you'll end up meeting all the ones you need to.
Nice. That's good. Jonathan Swift compared satire to a mirror in which people could see every face but their own. Can satire be destructive?
Oh, it congeals into cliche awfully fast, and the second something's a cliche, it you know, stops being listened to. This goes back to entertainment earlier, like, you know, I think about, like, you know, the Greek myth of Cassandra a lot, where we're just you know, she was right. her predictions were right, and everyone ignored them, probably because they mistook her for entertainment. You know, like the second something becomes a cliche, it stops. People stop listening. Yeah, that's all I got on that one.
That's why McLuhan wrote From Cliche to Archetype.
Right.
So Cage learned that the function of music was to sober and quiet the mind, thus rendering it susceptible to divine influences. For you, what is the function of music?
Well, it's a relationship. It's the function of music. I mean, it's a relationship. It's just it's this thing that just happens insofar as things are alive. So function. I mean, it definitely contains the signal and contains the message, and you. And I like it when it contains useful information that helps you model reality. You know, when it contains things that when it's news you can use.
Oh, news you can use. That is good. You know, one of my favorite interviews too is news you can use. Scoop Nisker. You know this guy. He's the comedian Buddhist there in San Francisco. He says, if you don't like the news, go out and make your own.
A friend of mine gave me he had a vinyl record under that title of cut-ups that's actually very much in the ballpark of Marshall McLuhan's Medium is the Message record. Yeah. It's just all of his media cut-ups that he made for K-San in the late 60s, early 70s. And because of the number of samples, I think he never actually commercially released it. But it's a masterpiece. Yeah. Like if you don't like the news, go ahead and edit it back together until those voices of those politicians are actually telling the truth. Yeah. I got to meet him once. He's definitely still on the scene, and I got to pay homage. He's everything you would expect him to be, and more. He's a real hero.
He's a hero to me, John. And I asked him all these questions once, and it was fun. And I showed his DVD once, and all it is a video of him doing stand-up Buddhist comedy. Yeah. And one of my regular viewers watching experimental films for 30 years go, that was the best film you ever showed, and all it was a guy standing there doing comedy, but it was so, grounded in, what could I say, reality and laughter. So there's a line that goes, you create what you resist, or what you resist persists. Bob Goldthwait says you are what you hate. But it was James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your mind is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And then Bunwell nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So, any thoughts on this idea? I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it, but you create what you resist. Not you, John, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that?
Well, of course, if you either or thinking, it's difficult to, you can't really get away from it, right? Like you try to take the middle ground, but at the end of the day, you occupy physical space that's on one side of some line or another line. So it's awfully hard not to find yourself reinforcing everything that you don't believe in simply by believing in something else. What are you going to do? But I think about this a lot. The signifiers of the counterculture just keep switching back and forth between consensus definitions of left wing and right wing, especially over the last 15 years. Like everything, it just used to be so much clearer where the power was to resist. So I can't even imagine how confused today's 15 to 20-year-olds who are still following all of the same countercultural, like, beacons of the last 50 years. But like, they don't read Thomas Pynchon, they don't read Robert Anton Wilson, but like, they're still fighting groupthink. It's just that they're the current alt-right beacons of all of these, mental tools by which one resists the media. That's all just gotten very confusing for, for all of us. So I think about this a great deal, about how to stay apolitical enough to see through something, because boy, the sides are being taken, and it's pretty important to figure out what side you're on.
Yeah. I feel with you immensely, because, in a way it's great. Chicago 7 film's going to win an Oscar, and kids can learn a little about it. And they got some things wrong, but they got some things right. But, Abby Hoffman said his biggest influence was McLuhan, and Marshall said, art is anything you can get away with. And Abby did what you should do with aphorisms, update it. And he says, revolution is anything you can get away with. Yeah. So, all the power to him. And of course, McLuhan nailed again. A half a truth is still a lot of a truth. If we can get a little. So, there's a couple artists that I'm intrigued with. Joseph Beuys, who blended politics and art. He said, make the secrets productive. Lou Welsh, beat poet, who's an ad man, also said, guard the secrets, but constantly reveal them. But it was Thornton Wilder in 1928 said, art is confession. Art is the secret told. But art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. John, you've laid your cards on the table for 90 minutes. It's been a pleasure. You've been very articulate. What's it really all about for you? I'm not implying you haven't said this, but what is it really all about for you?
Well, the work of art is at best an arrow pointing back to the actual experience that only you can experience yourself. There's only so much you can point at the thing. The best you can really do is, make the beautiful arrow, and make the arrow just beautiful enough so that people don't make the mistake of spending their whole lives in front of it.
Yeah.
You gotta follow it.
It really resonates with two quotes or thoughts I've had. There's this Buddhist thing where when you're pointing at the moon, are you looking at the finger or the moon?
Yeah.
Or
yeah, I love that one. I love that one.
Yeah, and then the other one was like, I think it was Pat O'Neill, experimental filmmaker, said when you're looking at, or Brackage or Benning, one of the greats, said when you're looking at a movie screen, are you looking at this white movie screen, or are you looking at the content that's flashing on it? There's two things going on there. Right. So, it's all that George Lakoff neuroscience framing thing. And so we're going to bring Clinton in. He's going to ask you a question or two, and then I'll ask you a couple more. John, it's been a real pleasure and honor, and I hope we can continue this discussion forever. So the great thing about Clinton is he actually listens. Thank you, Clinton, for besides facilitating, listening. So I'm anxious to hear what you have to ask John.
Oh, microphone.
You're on mute, dude.
Ha ha ha. Had to happen. Anyway, yeah, no, thanks. This has been fantastic. And I've been taking notes, and usually I don't take this many. I think kind of between the two of you, your conversation has sort of been like this runaway Zamboni that managed to cover the entire rink of stuff I've been thinking about in the last 5 years. So try to figure out where to start. You said books are useful, but you need to keep them in perspective so that people don't just think that words comprise the totality of thoughts, right? But then you tend to use a lot of computer metaphors, like we have our senses put us into data streams, you know, the information that we get from art. Are you in your body? Are you inside your ambulatory structure, or are you a body, Jon?
Oh, it's a full-time job trying to remember that I'm in a body. Yeah. I think I was definitely raised to ignore the body as much as possible, but then, you know, you turn 35, 40, and you start suffering if you're not putting at least a little bit of maintenance.
I'm right there with you, buddy. Yeah, absolutely. So I relate heavily. Especially the way you described, you know, where is the stage when you're performing in a radio studio, because you're performing. So do I identify more with the output, right? The sound itself, like you are in the sound itself more so than you are standing there in the studio. Should I say, like, you're the expression? Who you are is being expressed in the sound.
Yeah, I'm trying to go away. So yeah, maybe that's what we're talking about. It's hard to say for sure.
When it comes,
go ahead.
Oh, so VR. You brought that up, and it's funny because before, you know, Pokemon Go came out, or before people started talking about Google glasses to describe augmented reality, the phrase augmented reality had been around for 10 years prior, and it was talking about the marketing techniques that J.J. Abrams used for his movie Cloverfield. Remember that, and it's the idea that there was marketing techniques which took place in reality. They made fake blogs and fake MySpace profiles and fake people and staged fake events to try and bring the reality of the fiction of the universe inside the movie, sort of drag people along into this merging of the virtual and the real. For how long have we been trying to erase reality with virtuality, you think?
Well, I mean, it goes back as far the history of augmented reality gaming and gamification and all of these things has been an overdrive basically since the turn of the millennium. Like, I'm fascinated by these games. I Love Bees that started off as, you know, part of a marketing department's like budgeting, advertising budget to like advertise another game. If you look at, check out I Love Bees, the Wikipedia page, because that ended up being far more influential. I don't even remember the video game that it was created to, you know, bring attention to. But that's what the Cloverfield, you know, the success of things like I Love Bees is what Cloverfield was launching off of. But, you know, it ties back in any metamedia way before reality television conventions became more credible and more authentic ways of telling a story in the 90s than, you know, like a high budget Hollywood film that sort of lost credibility. There are films from the 60s that just sort of like take into account not just Medium Cool or Year of the Sex Olympics or Coming Apart or God, what's his Jimmy something's Diary. I'm trying to remember the name.
David Holtzman's Diary.
David Holtzman's Diary. You got it.
Yeah.
These are films that are an index of storytelling techniques that try to erase themselves by like taking the camera into account. you know, they try to be more credible by showing you a jerky camera, by showing you the cameras that are in all of our lives at this point. And I see gamification and augmented reality games as, you know, extensions of, it's been going on well before that as well. But like, you know, it, there are roots that go back that are really fascinating about, with storytelling techniques that try to erase themselves as the story is being told.
Thanks for all the homework. That's fantastic.
Yeah, Lynn, that was brilliant. We could, if you have another one, let me just interject this for a second, because what you evoked there, John, with your answer was brilliant. Is McLuhan said, all advertising advertises advertising.
Yeah, yeah, it's the religion. It's the religion.
Yeah.
So.
And then what you said about Medium Cool and David Holtzman's diary, you know, I found who did that in the 20s was Zygmunt Vertov, Man with the Moving Camera.
Yeah, yeah,
the first, yeah. But let me interject this question.
Enthusiasm is that's the one that blows my mind. That's
the Vertov film, yeah.
Vertov Enthusiasm.
Yeah, very good. And please ask another one, Clinton. But let me interject this one because it fits, and I left it out. George Manupelli started the Ann Arbor Film Festival 59 years ago. His mantra is ignore yourself. Jonas Mekas said, there is no self-expression. And Cecil Taylor, great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. So the question, John, is art making, filmmaking, literature, whatever, more self-expression, or more they're just vehicles for whatever dominant technology or culture is currently present? I know it's both and it depends, but what do you sort of nudge more towards?
Every single culture has a state-of-the-art technology for telling stories, and it's interesting to watch which ones become like commercially successful masterpieces, which ones become cult, and which ones, you know, which ones really shine the light on what these technologies actually are. So, you know, like Patty Chayefsky's Network is a pretty, you know, we all agreed on that one. That, like, as it was happening, that film holds up. We look for the films that pull the camera back on themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you bringing up funk music earlier is my lifeblood. And one of James Brown's drummers died a year or two ago, and I said, how did you create funk drumming? He said, I lived in Ohio. Say it again.
Clyde?
Yeah, I think it was Clyde. He died about a year or two ago. He says, I lived in Ohio. One side of my house, there was a factory. The other side of my house, there was a train track. So the factory was going, psst, and the train track was going, chicka, psst, so he was, you know, where'd he get it? From the fucking technologies that were fucking coming through his window, you know.
Missy Elliott, like, I learned to sing from car alarms.
Is that what Miss Elliott says?
Yeah, that's one. Yeah, a lot of other things too.
Yeah, from car alarms. So here's the bottom line question to that: can art making be egoless?
I think the people who actually attend or, you know, see it as an ego-driven, self-expressive venture are the ones who are kidding themselves more than most. So yeah, it's not that it's not a factor, but, like, you know, you are a chapter.
Yeah.
But yeah, you had another. There was one other. Yeah.
Oh, me. Yes, of course. Well, I was thinking a lot about what you said, explaining tone quality overtaking the importance of melody given in electronic music. It's really interesting because electronic synthesis is, of course, so programmable, just working from oscillators up, compared to, as you described, you know, a typical analog instrument is that instrument, and then the performer will bring something out of it, but otherwise a violin is a violin, right? Computers are like the universal machine that can model anything and simulate more and more anything. Bouncing off what you just said about the state of the art forms of expression that technology gives people, what is the media? What is art today on computers? Is it video games? Is it electronic music? Is it hypertext? Like, what is it?
Games are important. I don't play them, but I find myself following them just because they clearly have become the dominant form of technological storytelling.
Mm-hmm. It seems like we've only created an infinitesimally tiny amount of the possible things we could create. If no new computer was invented or created and we were stuck with just what we had until the next 1,000 years, would we create 1% of the things that could possibly exist, given just rearranging a billion ones and zeros in every possible combination that
you'll never run out. You will never run out. The argument about running out of things to say renders itself a silly argument the second that the playing field for expression changes or shifts slightly. Like, you know, yes, orchestral music ran out of things and combinations to say right as recordings and recording engineering came along, and people just began happily exploring tonality again instead of like thinking that atonal music was the future. And you know, just when you think we've run out of things to say with film, video games are, you know, that game, The Last of Us Part 2, that was some Rashomon level. That did things with unreliable narration that you could not do with film. That game that came out several years ago, David O'Reilly's game Everything, that is films can't do that. Films can't do that. You don't run out, and when the electricity grid goes away and computers run out and we have to revert to more primitive means of storytelling, it will be in the context of a world that once had these toys. And once we go back to banging on rocks, I'm sure we will come up with new ways of banging on rocks that reflect a world that once had far more than rocks to bang on.
That's that great Carl Reiner Mel Brooks skit. Oh no! It's Spike Jones skit. That's it, Spike Jones. You ever see that skit where they're banging on rocks making music? But it also your question, Clinton, was brilliant. It evoked McLuhan saying the great American novel is the front page of the newspaper. You know, what's the great American video game? What's the great American TikTok? It is the medium itself, and then there's the content, how they use it. But, you know, I mean, for me, that's what Negative Land and Over the Edge did. They sort of took this medium of information overload, sort of like Joyce with Finnegan's Wake, and sort of regurgitated it and gave it back to you so that you could reconsume it and maybe see the light. Or what your last comment before Clinton's question really evoked for me, John, was pull the wool over your own eyes. You know, the subgenius line, you know.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. I love those guys.
Yeah. So this has been truly enlightening. We'd love to continue. We do these mashups where Clinton and me and you and whoever else could sit around for 2 hours and just bang it around more instead of me just interviewing you. But you've been really generous, John, with your time, and it's truly been enlightening. I just want to end with the last two questions is, what's the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you? I don't know. The teenagers are making sense, you know.
on both sides of the cultural divide, they're making sense. It's I don't know. I'm just spending a lot of time listening to teenagers. That's just follow their lead. See what they're going to do with it.
Yeah, because when you said about kids, they're not reading so much Robert Anton Wilson and Thomas Pynchon. I, by a fluke, got people to come to my Finnegan's Wake reading club, and they were like 18 and 19-year-olds old, and they brought a gang of like 8 of them, and it was really amazing how they opened up. And you know, the thing I find is the follow up is they'll show some, and most of them come in, interesting enough, through Terence McKenna's saying, oh, McLuhan and James Joyce are cool. So because they like Terence McKenna letting them take LSD, then they go, where'd he get it from? By studying these guys. So yeah. So Clint, unless you have another one, my last question is what gives you the most optimism, John?
Oh, it's the same answer. It's the teenagers.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's the youth. So John, it's really been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you it's been fun gabbing. Yeah, no, this was it helps me to you know, pull it all together myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
All right.
See you guys.